but we don't have to start. Whatever you want to do, Pat. I'm still letting
Yeah,
people in.
let's get started. If we end up getting more of the voting members, we can go back and do the meeting minute approval. Otherwise, we'll just add it to the list for next month. All right, so good afternoon, everyone. I'm Pat Bands from the town of Chester. I'd like to call the Regional Housing Committee meeting to order. And we will begin. I will ask Eliza to please do a roll call.
Sure. So because I don't have a ton of towns here, I'm going to do it a little bit differently. I just wrote your names down and I'm going to do it in that order. So sorry. From Chester, we have Pat Bands and Bonnie Bennett. From Deep River, we have Daniel Smith. From Middletown, we have Mark Kozakowski. From Essex, we have Thomas Pinkowish. From Lyme, we have David Lam. And from Middlefield, we have Jim Irish. We have Rivercog staff, me, I'm Eliza Lopresti, Sam Gold, our executive director, Megan Juflis, our deputy director. I think I saw Marcos Gonzalez, our regional planner. And I'm giving our titles because there's a few new people that are attending our meeting today. So let's say hi to Ben Lovejoy from CT DOH, Carla Lindquist from Hope Partnership, Julia McGrath from Congressman Courtney's office, along with Julie Way, also from the same office, Philip Shattuck from OPM, Jennifer Miller from Old Lyme, Michael Fogliano from Old Lyme, and Janice Atkinson from Essex. And if I missed you, please say hi.
All right, we need a couple more members then. All right.
Yeah,
everyone's accounted for.
I see Kevin Armstrong from Rivercog joining us as well, our GIS planner.
All right, we are going to skip the second agenda item right now, the approval of the minutes. We will move on to the public engagement discussion and the scope doc for the tech assistance grant.
Eliza, do you have that to pull up? Did you want to run through that part?
I didn't have it up.
I can grab it.
Megan, is this the scope that we're working on?
Yes.
Okay, I have a variation of it if you needed to.
Let's see.
And I see someone from Tyche just joined us. That's most likely Zoe Chatfield, I'm guessing.
It worked.
That's correct.
It is.
I was just changing my name in the box.
All right, so I have the doc. I'm just trying to get it out of OneDrive so that I can pull it up. There we go. And I just wanted to go over sort of what the plan is. And Ben, I don't think there are really changes to the deliverables. It's more just kind of some verbiage changes.
Yeah, as I mentioned to you when we talked, I think I mentioned in an email or something, there was, I took what you were able to send over to me and got it in the preliminary contract for review. And so, yeah, this will actually might be helpful for me as well, because I actually did receive the response from our staff attorney. So just to give some context for the committee as far as where we're at in the process on the DOH side of things. So as you're probably aware, and if there's new people in the room, I'll give a little background. A couple different municipalities in the region approached me at the DOH for technical assistance to help with the implementation of their affordable housing plans. During those conversations, it was sort of acknowledged that public participation support is something that both of those communities were looking for assistance with. I kind of encouraged the communities to talk to Rivercog and sort of brought Rivercog in as well to say, what function could maybe the regional approach to public participation support. And I kind of put it on RiverCog to create a structure or an approach for how to do that. They sent me over a structured framework for what their thought process was for how to provide regional public participation support. I took that framework and had a conversation with the Commissioner of Housing and my direct supervisor, Michael Santoro, and we both agreed that this was going to be a really great investment for the region to support the municipalities. Obviously, the ones that we're planning on assisting through grant work, but also just the communities that may need help with this. And then from there, I was able to get a soft approval for the amount that would cover the labor and contracts associated with this, and took that and sent it over. We have a structured sort of a boilerplate contract that needs to get approved by the Attorney General's office before we can issue the check for the grant. So based on that scope, I was able to tweak it just a little bit, get it into the document, and it's gone through our preliminary legal review from our in-house legal staff at DOH. They had some comments and feedback requesting some clarity on a few different things that were sent over. But the long and short of it is that they saw nothing glaringly wrong with what was requested or how the approach was going to be. It just needed, like I said, some clarification. So that basically means that once I get those comments back, we'll tweak it slightly. It'll go back to the AG's office, hopefully for approval with a signature. And then from there, the Commissioner of Housing would sign it. And then RiverCog would sign it, and we would issue payment. So we're in, at least on my side of things, in really good shape. All of the questions that my legal staff had for me were just clarifying points, things like, there was like the municipalities can request assistance, but it was like, how many times do you think, it just some really minor stuff that honestly, I think Megan and Eliza, if we sat down for about an hour, would be able to fix. And so if that goes as planned, hopefully I can get final approval and notice of award letter probably by the end of the month, if all goes well, or maybe the first week of April. So great shape on our side of things. And I'll kick it back over to Megan and Eliza to kind of bring you up to speed with what they're doing, but we're good. So I didn't get a chance to send that over to you. I've been working on some other things, but glad I got to share the good news with the rest of the group.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Ben. I'm glad to hear there's nothing glaringly wrong. I feel like that would have been awkward if that were the announcement. Okay, let me see. Okay, so generally speaking, I just kind of wanted to go through, we talked a little bit on our last go round about what the gist was that we were trying to put together based on your feedback. But just kind of walking through the scope that we're proposing. So the objective obviously is to assist our municipalities with laying the groundwork for more affordable housing consistent with the 830J plans by providing resources and training to conduct effective planning and engagement, and then also direct assistance on request. I know that's something that we're going to have to flesh out. It sounds like how many times. I think that might depend on how much help everyone needs. But that's something that we can figure out and talk about together. The first thing that we want to do is we want to create a housing resource website. We're going to be gathering a lot of materials. We're going to be putting together a lot of materials. We need a place for all of that to live. So we're going to create a home for it. We're hoping to make it pretty snazzy. And I think Kevin on our team is quite excited to get going on that once we have the go ahead. So we're going to, on that website, host our commissioner training modules that we're going to create as part of this effort. Also public education videos that we will create as part of this effort, and fact sheets that we will also create as part of this effort, and then resource links to all of the things that we have been collecting as a group throughout our time together. The educational training modules for commissioners, I think, is going to be one of the biggest deliverables that we put together. We're proposing to create a series of training modules that either can be self-directed and viewed on demand online or presented by town staff. So we'll create a packet for town staff to take and give the commissioner training, or that we at RiverCog could go and do the commissioner training if requested. We are thinking about a minimum of 4 topics. That's something that we want to use this group to flesh out what those might look like. Some ideas that we put together were maybe identifying areas in your town for greater housing density, how to conduct effective public engagement and build support for housing, how to navigate difficult conversations around housing, and how to vision and plan for housing in your 830J plans and your POCDs. So those are quite broad, and we want this to really be based on issues that you are seeing in your towns that come up in meetings regularly or frequently that you just really wish the commissioners would have a better grasp on or have more tools to deal with. So that's our goal there, and that'll be a partnership with this group. Once we identify what those things are, we're going to put together lesson plans. The lesson plans, I'll show an example of, so we put a template together of what we are anticipating those looking like. But we're planning to put together a lesson plan for each training module that's going to have a purpose and objective. It's going to have an explanation of the content. It's going to have a series of interactive activities for commissioners, all the supporting documentation, the list of materials that are needed, and then an assessment piece to see whether they're getting, whether there's comprehension of the material. And as mentioned, everything is going to be packaged so that either the town can do the training, we could do the training, or we'll have a separate package that's online that can be self-assessed. With that, we're going to be creating fact sheets. Some of them will go with the trainings to assist in that process. Some of them will be alternative topics that come up as we're discussing as a group. It might be on a regulation, a type of regulation. It might be stats and facts on a particular issue that's continuously raised, things like that. So some ideas that we put up here: zoning and other regulatory tools to promote housing, data and statistics, definitions or glossary of common planning terms. And we've already started creating some of these things. So the idea would be to make more of them, to make them more comprehensive, and to make them snazzier. And then task 4, we're looking at public education videos. I know I mentioned StreetCraft. They're getting a lot of press and publicity from me because I keep mentioning them. But they put online very short form, engaging, graphically rich videos that explain planning concepts, like, for example, how different development patterns impact traffic, or how having different things next to each other can impact walkability and bikeability, or what different types of density might look like on a vacant lot. So things like that, that again are, 3 minutes or less, very graphically rich, easy to digest, complex subjects that we can put online for us to use on our social media, or that you and all of our towns can use when different issues come up to explain topics. So we'll
Megan, what's the name of the street? What?
StreetCraft.
Craft.
I don't know if Eliza, you want to drop that in the. Thank you. And we, to that end, are looking for an intern right now. We have a posting up to find someone who does film and marketing to try and assist us over the summer with getting some templates to put that kind of thing together. And we can also, as part of our resource gathering, gather different things that already exist to add to our resource library, as well as what we create that's more locally specific. Um, and then the last task is really the public engagement and outreach assistance. That's where if a town has a project or a specific issue that's coming up and needs assistance putting engagement together, we can assist with that, whether that's related to a POCD, whether that's related to a purchasing of a property or for housing or the creation of a housing authority or what have you. We can either connect you to resources or physically show up and assist with the conversations. So that's kind of on an as needed by request, open-ended task. And so that's kind of what we are looking at for the general scope of the technical assistance. I guess I can pause before I show what the lesson plan might look like to see if there's any questions, because that's a lot.
A process perspective. So you did the scope of work, it already went to Ben. And Ben, you guys are putting it in the format that you need on your end.
Yep. So, yeah, they started that draft scope, and then from there I took that out. Had to add a little bit of clarifying language and tweak just slightly on some stuff. And then that got put into a standard contract. That contract then got sent to our legal team. The legal team does the preliminary review before sending it to the AGs because they've seen so many of these that they kind of know what the AG's office is going to do and like what they're going to like and what they're not going to like. One thing already is like the proposed ideas for what is in there. They were like, either we know for a fact you're going to do them and put in that you'll do that, or take them out. That's the kind of feedback that we received. So once I have answered those questions that they put in comment form on the draft contract with Megan and Eliza, I will then send it back to legal in our department, and then from them they send that to the AG's office when they are confident. Now, just for reference, if there are things that the AG's office has issues with within the language, and it's mostly just like they're really looking for like nothing to be vague. As long as they're good with it, they'll just send it back over. But there's possibility that there might be some edits or required additional information that they'll need before they can get approval and sign off from the Assistant Attorney General, who's the one who like gives the final clearance on the contract. But once it's out of them, it's back over to you, and then we can get payment issued for the grant almost immediately after it's been fully executed and signed.
Thank you.
I had a comment or question. And this is based on what I've seen in our public meetings and hearings and stuff. On the in task 2.1, when you talk about how to identify areas for greater housing density, I'd suggest maybe adding something like while preserving small town character or individual town character, because that's the main concern that that I've seen from the public. And I think if you include this from the start, it'll permeate all the way through the project, and you probably have a better chance of, doing what you want to do, which is have the public support affordable housing.
But you can't talk about character anymore.
Yeah, I was just going to mention, Thomas, that while that's probably good in presenting it, as far as contract language goes, I would be hesitant to include a term such as that for the sake of it really not being definable.
I get it. I get his subjectivity, and it is. So is affordable.
But Tom, another way to put it, I was recently briefed that that's considered exclusionary language. That's exclusionary language. And so what you say that it's the new redlining. That's what I was told.
What we can do is soften the way that we talk about it. We can frame it as we're looking at places where we would like to see more housing. We can avoid the D word altogether if that's necessary.
To be honest with you, Megan, I gotta check real quick. Hang on. I might have even taken out, because affordable is hard to define, I might have actually even kept it to just housing when it talked about it as far as what the scope language says.
And that's fair because we're looking at helping the town's plan for housing in general as well.
Yeah.
Well, if you want to use a word that people like, it's instead of housing density, housing diversity.
That one might be sticky these days as well.
Yeah, I know. Now you're on the other side. You know, but people really do. That's the main concern, is they don't want this to turn into, and then they'll name some town, which is terrible to hear. But you know,
But then those towns need to start defining what characteristics, not character, what characteristics of their town they want to preserve and get that in writing.
well,
Say
maybe
that.
is that a bad word? While preserving individual town characteristics.
Well, but you have to have them defined somewhere.
Well, they're individual. Yeah, no, I agree.
If you define them, then you can turn down a project based on not being consistent with those or jeopardizing those characteristics that you're trying to preserve. But most towns don't ever define them well enough to be able to do that. So you just have to watch it with that, because we can't be turning down housing because of rural character or something like that.
Something that we have kind of noodled on is showing sort of visual preference. You know, showing how different types of architectural design at different densities give a different feel. And we could talk about it in terms of housing variety, you know, variety in style and type, and do a visual preference and talk about it that way.
Yeah, I guess the point I was going to make is it is an issue you have to address at some point, whether it's in the fourth one, how to navigate difficult conversations of housing or whatever. So I was just like a placeholder somewhere where this is going to come up, and there's, you know, that's the hurdle that you're going to get. The only other comment I was going to make was down in when you talk about public, having maybe something about this is a terrible way to put it, but responsible home ownership or affordability, or basically how to stay in your house. I mean, you can build an affordable house, but there's also some public education that has a component that usually CFHA requires it. You have a, you know, budgeting or home ownership counseling that comes along with first-time home buyers and low mod income programs. And it's very successful when people go through it because, you know, they haven't done it before. So I know you're going to not duplicate what lenders do or CHFA, but maybe that's part of this too, or make sure that that's taken up in the public education area.
Good
Thanks.
feedback. Thank you.
Megan, I had a question from logistics, because this came back from legal. When you are talking, Kevin's on, I see, I'm assuming he'll be helping with some of the technical side of things. Are you envisioning that the website that has this information to be integrated into like a tab under rivercog.org, or would this be a separate like website, say, you know, public participation.rivercog.org or something? Like, is there two separate, or it'll be baked into it? And I have a follow-up with that as well as soon as I know that too.
So my preference, and I see the staff room is muted. So Kevin, if you want to jump in, oh, there you go. My preference would be to have it stand alone, because I would prefer to use Wix as opposed to WordPress because it's cooler.
Okay.
But Kevin, go ahead.
Yeah, logistically, it's one or the other. It's both are we're capable of doing. But I also agree with Megan from a coolness factor, for making it so that it's more marketable. It would be better to do it on its own.
And would it be? But it would be linked though, right? Like there would be some.
Oh, absolutely.
When you go to like rivercog. Okay, yeah, because one of the questions the attorney had was whether or not it was going to be its own website
Mhm.
or an integrated one. And then with the videos that are on there, do you imagine, and again, this might be getting ahead, but it was a question that kind of came up was, would the videos be like hosted on YouTube and then embed it, or would it be potentially a separate YouTube channel? Is it YouTube, or is it just you're just planning on uploading MP4?
Yeah.
Have you thought
It-
that process through at all, or no?
Yeah, file storage wise for video is texting. So YouTube would be the preferred method.
Okay.
We would probably lean in on the RiverCog YouTube just because that's an already established account. And if we were to start a new account, there's a cooling period for video length. So, which fortunately in our case, I don't think if we're doing 2 to 3 minute spots that it actually would be an issue, but it's still just generally easier to use the one video storage account. Now, I'm curious, Ben, just because I don't know the legal side of things. Is there anything against in terms of for the grant not having it under the RiverCog umbrella or vice versa?
No, just when I was putting the language in it, it wasn't entirely clear. So I used language like, assuming they would have a question for it, I wrote, website integrated with rivercog.org, and they were like, question, is this a separate website or is it all under
Okay.
rivercog.org?
So I would just
So-
add to that it's, did somebody have a question?
Go ahead, Kevin. Sorry.
Oh,
No, it was
I
me. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, the idea behind it is actually kind of a hybrid approach long
Okay.
term. So initially, we would start it on its own so that it has its own URL. You can put that on paper material and any form of advertising so that it's go to this thing versus go to the RiverCog website and click here, 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 and here. But 2-3 years down the road, when things are established and we're really not trying to get it off the ground anymore, it actually would make sense to absorb it into the RiverCog website. So is that okay?
Yeah, no, that's totally fine. They just, again, it's when things are a little vague, they
They put question marks and say, please explain.
So no, whether you do one or the other doesn't really matter. They just, as far as how they're looking at this, it's like this grant will fund the following. And they just want to be clear about, are you building a new website? Are you expanding an existing website? Are you so yeah.
And
It
wouldn't
sounds
be
like
a-
maybe, Ben, it sounds to me like maybe we have stuff that we need to discuss, like me, you, Kevin, and Megan.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't mean
If-
to
if
like,
you have a question.
yeah, I didn't mean to.
No,
kind
that's
of
okay, but
like-
I'm just wondering if we should have like a separate conversation about the technical stuff, because we still had some things up in the air that we knew of for sure.
Yeah, those are the only two things that I was wondering about mainly, like I said, was it, and that was for my own interest too. I was interested if you were doing it as a separate website or if it was going to be able to get baked into it. I know it can sometimes be hard to back your way into that by way of like creating a website because you are starting from the ground up and it forces you into certain formatting when you're using existing.
Right. And then
I
the
will,
smaller details, which we'll go over, like crediting the grant on the pages and that type of thing. I know we've done that. Like, for instance, Know Your Farmers was grant funded, so we made acknowledgements of that. So yeah, all of those details will be ironed out as we go.
Perfect. Thank
Also, we just like to make it look easy for this group here, so we don't like to show them all the stuff that we struggle with on the other side.
Right, exactly.
All right,
The duck
any other,
paddling.
any other feedback on the public engagement scope? Okay, if not.
Thomas, did you still have your hand up from before, or did you have another?
No, I just figured out how to raise it, so I'll take it down. I couldn't do it last night. I wasn't available anyway, sorry.
All right, so
There we
we're
go.
all set with this topic. All right, moving on. I think Eliza, you're looking for an update on the 830J goals and objectives?
Yes, so I'm actually going to give you guys a little bit of an update, and I do have some PowerPoint presentation. I have some slides. I'm not giving this as a presentation. This is really meant to be more of a discussion, which might be hard on me with my little tiny laptop screen seeing everybody. So please interject and put hands up as I'm talking. I know we don't have a quorum, and most of the people in this meeting are not official representatives. So I'm not going to spend a ton of time doing this, but we asked you to, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so recently we had made a spreadsheet with all of the goals from all of our town's 830J plans, and then we dissected it by town and sent it out to each of our representatives, looking for just kind of an update where everybody is going. I'm sorry, I'm having technical issues. Okay, there we go. With their plans, and to let us know whether your goals have like if you haven't started them, if you're in progress with your goal, or if it's something that's been completed. And we're looking at this because pretty soon we're going to have to start working on the plan updates. They're due in 2027. So the hope is that we would start working and to also see how we can provide assistance in meeting any of these goals, and if towns can help each other. If some towns have hit a goal out of the park that another town hasn't been able to start, if we can partner those two towns. However, I did not get a ton of responses. So I looked at the top goals, which I defined as goals that were shared by 10 or more towns. I did receive responses from actually 9 towns. Deep River was able to give me their response, but it was after I made these slides. So the top 5 goals that we saw were to promote USDA and CHAFA programs, pursue partnerships with nonprofit organizations and or senior community development groups, public education, to promote ADUs, and to consider development of municipally owned land. So some of these are pretty low hanging fruit. I would say this first one, which is to promote USDA and CHAFA programs. Almost everybody had this as a goal. Of the 8 towns that I analyzed, 7 had it as a goal, but 6 had not started it. So I thought this would be kind of an easy place to start to talk about how your town can make this goal happen for you. So like I said, I would like this to be a little bit more of a discussion than a presentation. So I'm just wondering, of the people on this call, what does that mean to you? What does promotion of CHAFA and USDA programs mean when it's listed as a goal in your 830J plan? I know what I think it means, but I want to know what you guys think it means. Anyone? All right, just jump in if you want to say something at some point. So there was one town, the one that had started it, and that was Haddam, and they're not here. Bill was able to tell me how many housing units were developed through these programs in the past 5 years. So a question that I have outstanding for him is how is Haddam tracking that, and what did they do to promote those programs? So I think Haddam might be a good place to look. I can certainly question Bill about that and see what he did that was successful.
Isn't
and at
that
the end of this,
reported on the appeals list? Are the CHFA ones, aren't they reported on the appeals list?
Yes.
Okay, I thought so, yeah.
oh, okay.
Yeah, they
Yeah, I
are.
didn't
And
know
that,
that.
so those 5 should show up on the Haddam appeals list then.
And just from a logistics, how operational side of things, we Laura Watson, my coworker in the department with me, she receives a master list from CHAFA each certification cycle that says how many houses are owned under the first time home buyers program, which qualifies as a unit towards the 10% number. So we also have
Yeah.
that. on our side too, and if you go onto the 830J website, on the DOH, it will also list that as a separate category within the municipality.
Because we were,
Okay.
you know how you get the annual appeals list from your office, Ben, and
Correct.
they asked the towns to validate that, but we're trying to figure out where you get that information. So you're saying for that particular one, contact Laura Watson? Is that the name?
For where she gets that from?
Yeah.
Yeah, how do we find out who's
Yeah,
got
so
mortgages?
the only, you don't have to report those at the town level because we receive a separate report from Chaffa that contains the information about number of housing units that are currently under mortgage by municipality. I'm trying to pull up, I actually have it to see what it looks like on my side of things. Because I
Right.
recently had to go through that. But yeah, that is reported, and but like an example, you know, like the difference would be like if someone owned the house in 2023 and they were a first-time home buyer, and if they sell the house though, and the person who purchases it just gets it with a conventional mortgage, not through a first-time home buyers program,
Okay.
that unit, while
You
it
lose it.
might technically be considered previously affordable, wouldn't count if the person is not using a first-time home buyer's like income-based cap. Does that make sense? Because the way that the Chaffa program works, it limits how much money you can make and how much you bring in to utilize the program. So even
But
though
they'll
the house
update
would
their own
essentially be
list?
the same, it may no longer count. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes sense, I think.
But then CAFA updates their own list. So we're trying to figure out, do we have to, I don't know how to verify that. I just use their number.
Yeah. Hang on here, government assisted deed restricted.
If there's a way to, I don't know how you would verify it.
Yeah, I'm gonna pull it up now. I'm not entirely sure, but if you have any questions concerning that, feel free to send them my way and I'll make sure to get them to Laura. But yeah, let me see if I can pull up the spreadsheet to see if it actually lists specifically like where they are. But Chaffa, if you did contact Chaffa and you wanted that list, I believe they'd be able to share it to you by the town.
Ben, we get in the town, and I guess Pat Ben can confirm, but we get this list saying, please, or the appeals list saying, please confirm. But really, my impression was that the only thing we had to confirm was how many deed restricted units we have. The rest of it is not in our bailiwick.
Okay.
Is that
that's
correct?
good. Yeah.
Is that true, Ben?
I like to answer with confidence, and I can't confidently answer that one. I can, but like I said, if you have specific questions on it, I will be more than happy to get that. Laura, that's like a huge part of her job, is just to maintain and keep that updated. So I'd be more than happy to get those answers if you guys just put them to me in something that I can send over to her.
So Eliza, to answer your question, I think this would be something that maybe is a fact sheet about these programs and what they are and how you apply and how you qualify for them. And then it's something the towns can put out in their communications and on their websites.
Yes, I agree. At the end of this presentation, I made 2 slides for each of these goals. And with this goal, I did put some links to fact sheets for both of the programs. And if you guys take a look at the websites for both of those programs, they do have multiple different types of programs. So maybe a link or something. They actually have a lot of really great information that was very easy to understand. So one more thing I just wanted to say is I did put those information at the end of this presentation. So what I'm going to do is take notes as we're talking. I'm going to then go back in and add what we're discussing right now into the slides, and I'm going to send this out to everybody. So everybody has all the materials and all the things that we've captured in this discussion in one package for you. But yeah, I think putting something up on your, your town's website, or even doing a social media blast or your town newsletters or what have you is a good way to start, to say that you're working, you're doing this goal of promoting these programs.
And
Michael, I see you have your hand up. Oh,
Thanks, Eliza. Old Lyme does have this goal in our 830J plan. And initially we were thinking exactly along these same lines, just to promote the programs, raise awareness so that first-time home buyers would at least be aware of the opportunity to take advantage of it. What we've actually seen over the last couple of years, because of the craziness in the housing market, is that we are actually losing CHFA financed housing, because when the original CHFA financed buyers sell it, not only are they not selling it to another CHFA eligible buyer, but the valuation of the house has risen above the threshold. So so the house doesn't qualify anymore. So I don't know what to do to solve that, but we may want to add a branch to this thinking of not just to raise the awareness for buyers. And I'll also add that inventory is not being replaced, because the homes that are being built are much more expensive. So we may want to add a branch to the thinking on this, to not just raise awareness to the potential buyers, but to developers for the market. And I see also that there's more funding available for starting, or at least proposed funding for starter homes coming down from the state. So we just might want to add that dimension to the thinking on this goal.
great. I did write that down. That's a great idea.
And I was just going to jump in real quick, Eliza, thinking forward to our updates to our 830J plans. We are trying to look at these goals to accomplish, what we've set out to do, to create more housing, to create more affordable housing, and so on and so forth. But we're I think I mentioned this on the last call, but this was our first stab at thinking through this process, right? And it's okay to have some trial and error, but what we want to do is to be able to document. We said this was a step that we wanted to take. Here are the things that we've tried in order to get there. So we're documenting, right? We've collected this many fact sheets. We've put them out on this many websites. We have had this many additional housing units created, and so on and so forth. Or to Michael's point, we've done all of these things and we're still seeing this problem. We need to pivot to try these other things. And that's all going to be documented in our next step. It's sort of like writing a recipe, testing the recipe, seeing if it worked or if it didn't, documenting the success or the failure and what you're going to do to try and change it. So just trying to think of it in terms of, this is not a check the box thing. We had this goal, we checked it off that we did it, but it is sort of an active and interactive process to try and figure out what's going to work and what's not. And the more we can document on what we're trying and what's working and what's not, the more effective we're going to be able to be.
Absolutely. Thank you, Megan. And also, I mean, these goals are not, to piggyback on what Megan said, they're not check the box and you're done. Like, this is something, along with like promotion of your ADU regulation, right? This is something that's ongoing forever. Unless you're like, get to the point where, hey, the market is fantastic and every person has an affordable house. So maybe we'll get there. Does anyone else have any more comments, thoughts, ideas on CHFA or USDA programs or promotion in general? Okay, so the next one that I saw that a lot of towns had as a goal was to pursue partnerships with nonprofit organizations and or senior community development groups. This was actually two separate goals that a couple of towns had, and I kind of smushed it into one. So of the 8 that answered me, 4 had it as a goal, 2 had not started, 2 had worked with Hope Partnership, but it was prior to the 2022 plan. But continue to engage when and where possible. So questions that came up for me when I was looking at this goal is who in your town is pursuing partnerships? What does that look like? What town has done this successfully that can speak to it? And we know a couple in our region that have worked with Hope. I know Clinton is an active project right now. Are there parcels in mind for working with these partners? And I did put a reference to the list that Marcos had made us about a year or two ago about how Hope, Habitat, and Mercy work with municipalities. So you'll have a link to that as well. They were like little one-page fact sheets, some of you might remember. So what does this look like in, even if it's not Hope Partnership related, just in general, partnering with nonprofit organizations, whose role is that in your town? How does that come about? Does anyone have any ideas?
Well, the lowest hanging fruit for towns with partnerships is municipally owned buildings or land and releasing an RFP or an RFQ to develop it.
Yep, and that was a goal on this list as well, so.
Right, and so that pretty seamlessly combines the partnership component of working with an organization like ours, and, you know, getting more housing developed. But I also would just say, and this comes up pretty much every time we talk to a municipality, which is that every deal is going to look different. And so it could be a lot of different structures in terms of how a partnership comes together. But I would say in every single case, you need the buy-in of the elected officials, and the town pursuit has to include the political will to do whatever it is that the partnership end goal is. So the who in the town, it needs to be whoever can speak from a leadership perspective, and then ultimately it needs to be someone who can drive, you know, putting agreements together and you know, finalizing a deal.
Thank you, Carla.
And I will mention, in my work with the technical assistance program, we've also had conversations with municipalities about hiring basically development consultants. And so you basically, a municipality can hire a development consultant that will help them think about, like, if you, in the example which was just used, like a state-owned property or parcels that are available. We've seen a model where the development consultant comes in and kind of lays out what the town can do to get to that space. And then ultimately, that development consultant can help the municipality go through the process of doing the RFP to potentially bring in a group like a Hope Partnership or a Habitat or whoever it might be. So there's a few different ways to explore that. And if any municipality wants to explore that a little bit further, they're more than welcome. We've had a couple towns like approach us about what they can do to create this. And so if you need to ever meet with us directly, I want to make sure that people know that the agency is available to assist if municipality wants to go that route as well.
Ben, have you seen that like parcel specific, or is it like
that one usually
area,
when you're
like
at that stage, yeah, it's more parcel specific, but at the same time, you might be aware of a piece of legislation that passed last year that basically state-owned properties that are available are prioritized for housing development. So if a municipality wants to find out what those are, the town, the assessor or the clerk's office can pretty quickly pull those parcels to find out which units which parcels are there. And we can certainly assist with having those conversations about what that would look like as far as the handover or the sale from the state to the town. But yeah, there's definitely ways to get this done, but it's usually at that stage when you're bringing in a development consultant, that's usually based on, from what I've heard, is based on the parcel.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone here that has been trying to, like, say, engage with a senior community development group and has not been successful, or any other kind of nonprofit, and would be willing to share about that a little bit and why? And you may not know the answer to that. Okay, I'm going to move on. Okay, Next one was public education. So I'm not going to belabor this point, but we are here to help you with this. That's something we obviously have in the works, as we talked about in the beginning of our meeting. And just one question I'm going to put out there again. What do you envision that to look like in your town? If anybody has any other ideas or comments that they did not make earlier, lay them on me. Or any questions about even what we talked about earlier or public engagement as a whole.
I can tell you what it shouldn't look like.
Please do.
We've been through this twice over the past 2 years, and it's not the way to do it. It's the process that's followed. It's constant challenges and fighting, and ends up in a legal environment. So that's not the way to do it. That's why we need to change the model, how we do this.
Oh,
I mean, in North Stonington, we had community conversations, just tried to make it as informal so we didn't end up in the situation like Tricia was describing, because it's an unpopular subject.
Did you do those like when, Julia, did you do those like when there was a specific development happening, or was it before that?
No, we tried to get ahead of it that way. So it was in our POCD, and we just scheduled to try to keep the POCD alive. We scheduled these community conversations like once a quarter or something like that on topics that the planner knew were going to be controversial, or I might have had a heads up that something was coming in, and so we could talk about it. But it's just to try a way to make it a little less like a meeting, more like a conversation to allow people to vent. And then the hope was that the meetings wouldn't be as contentious if they were allowed to vent ahead of time. That I'm here to say that did not work. The meetings were just as contentious when the development came in, but it's still, I think it let people feel like they were being heard. So, but it was a good way to get certain.
Did you find that you had the same? Sorry, I'm on a little bit of a delay. Did you find that you had the same attendees at the community conversations as at the contentious meetings?
Oh yeah, definitely, depending on the topic. But you got a few more people at the community conversations, so that was good. And then we also had a newsletter that went out quarterly, I guess it was. And so we could always put stuff in there that was direct mailed to everybody's house in our town. So that was a good spot that we could get information out. And then we had a housing commission that actually wasn't very effective. So they morphed into their own 501c3 and continued work in North Stonington. So, that they could partner with us, as well as ECHO is the group that we always use.
Okay, thank you. Carla, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just want to say that I agree that I think proactive community education or outreach is important. I would venture to say that I think it's really important to give people a sense for how we got here and what the trajectory looks like for the housing market moving forward without action. It's still surprising to me how many folks don't include the housing market in supply and demand and their understanding of supply and demand economics. And they don't have a thorough understanding of how zoning impacts housing costs. And so I think just going over those two things for folks in sort of a non-threatening way would be helpful, and then kind of let them draw their own conclusions in some way. But I think the other thing that's important to highlight is that Connecticut is, by most measures, in the worst place in terms of what our housing costs are going to look like long term by pretty much every study, every projection, every Zillow forecast that comes out, because we are not building housing stock, and because so much of it is old and it falls off the inventory, and folks need to realize that and in a, I think, a more immediate way. I think if folks had a better sense for why we're here, why this is happening, and what's it gonna look like without any intervention, they might be slightly more receptive to a variety of different solutions. And I think that presenting it that way feels a little bit less threatening than trying to describe the need, you know, within the context of a specific development, like others have mentioned. So.
Yeah, thank you. Absolutely. Great ideas. Anybody else? Has anyone here been part, I know Julia had to drop off, but other than her, has anyone here been part of a community conversation? Because I took part in one and it was really a cool experience. Like a moderated, it's like people are trained to do community conversations is what I mean, not just like, hey, let's all chat about this thing. It was an interesting model. We did one to do a strategic plan for the library in our town. So just a thought, if anybody's
Who
looking into stuff like
moderated that, Eliza? Who was the moderator?
He was actually, I don't remember his last name. His first name was Chip, and he was a person that like got a certificate in these community conversations, and he I think is just like an independent consultant that would go around. He's from our town, so he knew like what he was dealing with, and he kind of knew all the players. But I do have his contact information if you ever would like me to handle that over to you.
I think it's a cool idea, actually. I think just in general, good for a good training model for a lot of different issues, not just housing. So that would be a good thing to do, I think.
Yeah.
And
No,
Eliza-
it was really judicious and interesting. Was that you, Ben?
Yeah, I'll just mention that Scrog has offered that as a part of their housing working group. They have a consultant on hand who makes himself available to the municipalities by request to come in and do that work. He is fantastic, but if you know you're interested in how that's operated, I would encourage you can reach out to Stephanie or Laura Francis over there at Scrog to get information. I think I'm not sure if they're going to roll it into their next year budget plans, but I do know that it was in operation for 3 years now. So that it could be a resource for you if you have any need for it.
Yeah, thank you. I'll ask Stephanie about that, and then I can share. Okay. Did anybody have any more on public education? I know that's a big one for everybody. So I don't mean to gloss over it, but I feel like we talked about it earlier. So the next one was promoting ADUs. So similar to promoting the CHFA and the USDA, right? There's certain ways that towns can go about doing this. This picture that's on the screen is a little one pager that Chester has. And I think Deep River has a very similar one as well. That this is a couple years old now, but I had it in our archives, so I threw it on here, but it's something like this. You know, put it up on the website, blast it out in your social media. Just ways to get people to know that they can build these things in your town. And on this screen is where I put, this is more of a general question, not necessarily for ADUs, but like Megan was saying earlier, like it's not just having the regulation that, oh, we allow everybody to build ADUs and nobody is. If it's not working for your town, is it because no one knows about it? Or is it because it's not a user-friendly regulation? So those are things we have to ask ourselves. And I will put in one little plug, personal plug for ADUs is I would love if towns could track how many ADUs you have. And I know some of you do, but it's not like nobody has a way to do it that everyone follows, but that would just be an interesting concept to know.
also, Eliza, really helpful if you track it for us to gauge whether a certain change in a regulation or a certain increase in, marketing the opportunity is having an impact. If you've just changed your regulation and you went from 2 applications to 20, that's helpful to know.
I can't find the raise
Right.
hand button here. That they keep moving these screens, but I wanted to comment that it's in our POCD to come up with some carrots for this, because our community is aware of it, but we haven't received any permits. And something that we've been playing with in Deep River, and I know other towns as well, is coming up with some type of incentive, tax or otherwise. So that's what's in our POCD, and we're presenting that to the community. We presented to the community our POCD at the beginning of this month, and we're going to be presenting again at the beginning of next month with the help of Taiki to see if we can get some people. I don't know if excited is the right word, but at least get people interested in building ADUs.
Daniel, I know Deep River does have a fact sheet like this. Do you know if anything in present or past has been done to kind of alert your residents that this is an option, or how do people know about it?
I believe it's on the website. We have the sheet. That's why we want to put incentive. We put incentive in the POCD, because I think people see that, but they aren't going to go through the effort. I feel like if they're doing a renovation, or if they already we have a lot of dwellings, a lot of units that actually already have ADUs, but they aren't documented as ADUs. And I think if we put some incentive, that those will start showing up. That's kind of the optimistic viewpoint right now.
Carla, did you have your hand up?
I did.
disappear?
I mean, the number one thing that I would think folks might want to be paying attention to is owner occupancy requirements with ADUs and tracking whether that's having an impact. I don't know if any of the towns in our region have that as part of their regulation, but I would anticipate it could be impactful.
I should mention another thing that we're doing is we're amending our zoning regulations, because I forget the exact number, but an ADU can only be built within 30% of the square footage. And I think we're going to change that.
I think that Old Saybrook is pretty good about tracking their ADUs, and they actually have a lot. So they might be a good, and Megan, you can probably speak to this a little bit better than I can, but they might be a good resource. I don't think anybody from Old Saybrook is here. Oh, here comes Dan.
Yeah. I can see if I could get Chris Costa, who is the CEO and de facto planner. She does like 8 jobs over at Old Saybrook, as I think most of our planners on the call know. But anyways, could probably get her to join a meeting to talk about what they do.
I can chime in about tracking ADUs. Any planning and zoning office that enters data, zoning permit data into a computer should be able to track ADUs pretty easily. I will say that we had ADUs in our Middletown housing plan, and then we also was at Public Act 2129 or something like that, where municipalities were almost forced to write regulations for ADUs. In Middletown, we almost exactly matched what was in the statute. We still opted out, but matched, and we've only had, I don't know, a couple of ADUs, nothing more than we would normally get in any given year, because we allowed them previously, but under tighter restrictions. So there's tracking shouldn't be all that difficult. And if you need that data, I'm sure you can reach out and get it from us.
Awesome. Kevin, you want to put
Thank
in a
you.
plug for document digitization and how it makes it better to track things?
So much easier.
Right.
I made the plug for you.
If anybody,
Never mind.
Oh, yeah, I'm not
if
sure what
anybody
else.
wants
to say.
documented.
If
Kevin, do
anyone
we
in this
still have,
group has,
sorry, I was just gonna ask if we still have licenses.
we do, yeah, so I was just adding, if anybody in here has the power to run it up the chain to say that you would like to store your documents in our cloud, please get that conversation going. I know I'm already working with Chester and Deep River. They've been pretty hot to trot since the beginning.
And thank you for doing that. I know it's a lot of work on everybody. Anybody else ADUs?
So, sorry, I hopped on
And
late.
the last, hi.
I saw it just got on. I just see the 8 sounds answered, 6 had a goal, 2 in progress. I answered you, right? Pretty sure.
I don't remember. I don't remember off the top of my head. It's okay if
All
you
right.
didn't.
Okay.
And
All
thank
right.
you if you did. So yeah, I was saying, Dan, that we didn't have like, this analysis is, I basically just kind of took like what were the top goals because I didn't have full participation from everyone, which is fine. It's okay. So the last one that we're going to talk about is kind of goes hand in hand with one we already talked about, but considering development of municipally owned land. I did have one town say that they brought it, that the public didn't want it. So I'm not sure if that was how that was determined. It must have been at a public meeting. Maybe there was a parcel, and I don't know, Jim, if you're still on here, I think that was Middlefield. Is Jim still here? I can't see everybody. He is.
Yeah, I'm still here. We weren't, we were talking about public or town-owned land for sale to the public, but it wasn't necessarily for any particular style of housing. And there was a strong sentiment in town that the residents were happy with the open space that the town-owned land currently offered them. And they preferred the town land not to be offered for sale for residential property.
Okay, thank you. So that was land. So I guess, you know, in looking at this goal, does your town have buildings or land appropriate for development? Do you have an inventory? If you do, does everyone here know about resources like Yukon Tab, which I can talk to a little bit, and how can we help? So those are my questions. And I see Carla has her hand up. I should mention this picture is Pearson School in Clinton that Hope is working on right now.
Yeah, and I don't mean to, like take up all the airspace on this.
No.
But
You have
the other thing, I just want to remind folks who are on the municipal side is that a deal doesn't have to be structured as a sale. You don't have to lose that asset forever necessarily. There are lots of different ways that you can work with a developer to get more housing. And, it doesn't always have to be outright sale of, a parcel or a building and the land underneath. And so that's just something I think that's important to keep in mind. There's lots of different structures that you could pursue, which might be more interesting to, a variety of different towns, just because, different public groups have different perspectives on development. So.
Great point. Thank you.
Eliza, just very quickly, what is Yukon Tab?
So Yukon has a division called TAB, which is Technical Assistance to Brownfields. And actually someone from Yukon Tab is going to be giving a short presentation at our COG meeting tomorrow morning. If anybody wants to come, I can send you the link. Just let me know. They are a free resource to municipalities that help if you have brownfield. So I don't have all the details to give you, but they are able to help with they aren't able to help with grant writing, but they will review grants to let you know, like, if they're in line with the programs that give out money. They will help you with an inventory. They kind of like will hold your hand through the step of working on a property that is a brownfield that you would like to redevelop. They have met with Susie Beckman and I and have asked us to help them coordinate a roundtable for brownfields this summer. That would be for our entire region. That would be open to everyone, including developers. Although they don't work directly with developers, they do work with municipalities. Or, you know, if you have a brownfields redevelopment agency or some kind of other group in your town that can help. And I think I put the website for them on the end slide, Pat, if you want to take a look at things that they do.
I
Katie,
didn't know what it was.
yeah, I think a lot of people don't know.
I'm looking at the time here. Is this something, I don't know how many more slides you have, Eliza, but
No,
I
we're
know-
done.
All right.
Can I just
Yeah, I
circle
just want to
back
wrap it up with, oh, go ahead, Bonnie.
I could circle back to Ben. I think Ben was, in addition to municipally owned property, he said something about a list of state-owned properties that are available. And I wanted, if, you know, to circle back with him to say, where do you access that? We've got a third of the town of Chester is state-owned land. So is there a place we would look to see if they have property they wanted to make available?
There's a inventory of state-owned parcels. I don't know exactly where it is. I do know that it exists because I've heard it referenced before. But yeah, there is a list. And it, again, if it's available, you know, if it's in the middle of a forest, obviously that's a little different than if it's a parcel. But yeah,
we may follow up with you.
Ben, is that something you can find out who we can contact to get that list?
yeah, I might be able to, like, it's probably like a Google search. Give me a second. Let me see if I can find it real fast.
All right. If you do, can you just put it in the chat there? Because I think our next topic is gonna take a little bit of time here. So I'd like to just move this along. Is that all right?
That's good.
Yes. Yep. So anyway, so here are the links and the notes and suggestions that I'm going to send out to everybody. And I'll send an email with all this information. So I'll stop sharing.
Thank you, Eliza, for that.
Welcome.
It's interesting. All right, then. The next item, the last item I think on our agenda today is build tracker update. Always interesting to know where we're at in this current legislative session. So
That is also me. I'm not going to take a lot of time with this. I need to just move my screens. Hold on one second, because I'm going to email what I have to everybody. And here we go. So this is not a comprehensive list at all. We just put a few on here that have been deemed joint favorable, which means they're moving through the process. And you'll see that I linked anywhere that we submitted testimony, so you can take a look and see what Sam submitted on behalf of the COG. The first one is, and I'm not going to read through all these, but the first one is House Bill 6944, which is basically what's being called Towns Take the Lead bill, and it's based on the Open Communities Alliance bills of the past years. And this bill takes implementation of the state fair share draft plan, which has not really been released or adopted yet, and kind of tells towns what they need to plan for. And all of these are active links on here, so you can go through and take a look at the actual bills. SB 12 is a bigger one. When we submitted testimony on this bill, there was pretty much no text in it, but since then they have substituted text with the bullets you'll see here. It's a group to study barriers to starter home construction. They're tying an increase in school building grant money for towns that meet the affordable housing threshold, state bonds that can finance affordable housing projects that create construction jobs. Department of Housing is to create a pilot program for that. It deals with tenants' rights, deals with commercial conversion to residential as of right, CHAFA programs for people that have student debt, which it was interesting, and an increase of rental assistance vouchers for elderly, disabled, and specific families that are in this Head Start on Housing program. We have an Act HB 6960 establishing public infrastructure grant program for certain municipalities. So that's grants for water, sewer, or roads associated with deed restricted single family and middle housing. SB 1313 is another larger bill that's transportation oriented development. And I see that Sam put his video on. So Sam, I know you probably want to jump in on some of these. Please feel free to do so. Just interrupt me. I can't see you at the moment. Another one that I thought, what'd you say?
You answer questions if any discussion comes up.
Okay. So another one that I thought was interesting is a grant program to assist municipalities in developing pre-approved building plans. And then these last two are concerning, residential and mixed use developments as of right in commercial zones and properties. And then there are two that I added to this list that haven't been JF'd yet, but they are ones that we're watching. And that's HB 6831 and 5365. The first is the Work, Live, Ride bill having to do with TOD. And then the second is one that we submitted testimony on. There were a couple of bills like this that were suggesting an exemption from the 830J process for municipalities that contain an aquifer. Does anyone have any questions that Sam can probably answer?
Any thoughts on which ones are going to have traction by the end?
No.
Not have traction?
No idea. Some of the players behind some of these bills have been working on this for years, and there seems to be some momentum to get something passed, but we don't know. There was just some of the bills are a little bit concerning. Like one set of bills that the Connecticut chapter of the American Planning Association opposed, into the Rivercog, was the by right conversion of all commercial buildings by right. Development of residential uses in all commercial districts. I got questioned. I testified against those bills. There's also a subset of that would allow by right conversion of motels into permanent housing, and I testified explaining that motels provide a very important housing role as being the housing of last resort for many in the state. And that motels are already housing in a lot of places, and furthermore, if you turn them into apartments, you can still Airbnb them out. So in effect, they could still be a motel. So, but anyway, that concerned me just because the whole point of planning is to avoid land use conflicts, and if you have something that creates land use conflicts, you've really failed in planning. And there's a number of commercial uses that you probably wouldn't want to live next to, or businesses who wouldn't want that may be loud, have lots of noise or smells, or a lot of traffic. That may not want to have residential neighbors complaining all the time about them. So there's that. Of course, we have the TOD bills that really are very light on the T, with really understanding what level of transit you need to be truly transit oriented. So those are, of course, our concern. But yeah, we don't really know. I know something will get through. Just because I think there's a lot of political momentum behind this, but we will see.
Hey,
Yeah.
anything else, Eliza, on this?
Ben on the spot because he used to work there in the LOB, and maybe he had some idea. I don't know if he can actually, do Monday morning quarterbacking or whatever.
All I'll say is be aware that this is a budget year. With that being said, not only is it a budget year, but the proposed budgets that are out there, and a lot of the discussion that's going on would require that the legislature modify and change the fiscal guardrails. And I'm sure you've heard in the news at some point in time that the governor's been holding strong to support those. He sees a lot of value in them. And without modifying those, how they get to the end with a budget that would increase spending is really complicated. That being said, there would be either one larger piece of legislation that would modify those guardrails, which would have to be negotiated. But long story short, it's a highly complicated process that would likely take a lot of time for the legislature to debate and to discuss and to ultimately adopt. So be aware that that's what's going on. And before really anything can happen, the budget needs to get passed. So, we're supportive of the governor's budget and the initiatives, but from a legislative, like sausage making perspective, like that is going to take up a lot of the time. So I say that because we don't have that yet. We don't have that process completed yet. And really most legislation in theory would be on hold until that process gets completed. So it's hard to say really what would in any given session, but in this one, it's particularly complicated by some of those constraints. So I'm thankfully not in charge of monitoring that any longer. But I will say, taking off the state cap, that process is really complicated. And it'll require a lot of time. And every time one bill is being considered, be aware that another bill is not being acted on. So it is we are in a part-time legislative structure. And so keep your eyes peeled for when they're going to have session and see what happens, I guess. Get your popcorn.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point because these discussions about the budget will take all the oxygen out of the room. And what we may see is some of these housing concepts being slipped into a budget implementer bill as rats at the last moment. So so that unfortunately happens more times than not. And sometimes you get things that are maybe shouldn't get passed in the middle of the night. But the other thing that I'll just add in that Eliza didn't touch upon was we did meet with OPM's consultant for the Fair Share Housing study, so that they are finishing their work, which will identify numbers for each town in Connecticut or city and town in Connecticut for housing production. That we had an interesting conversation with them, and I don't know if we want to really get into that, but that should be coming out shortly. The Towns Take the Lead bill, which is I think deceptively called a bill that does adds more information to affordable housing plans. I think that bill was proposed long before we even got close to a draft fair share housing. So so we'll see how and when that fair share housing bill, fair share housing study will get released and how that may impact legislation because it's coming after the hearing schedule for planning and development and for housing. So
I will follow up that one interesting thing that is out there. I know that anytime there's change, people are what's going to happen, where it's going to go. But I will say there are some really neat concepts out there about supporting municipalities. And one thing I'm really hopeful for that I've seen in multiple languages, multiple bills, similar language, is having the Department of Housing formalize the technical assistance program that I'm sort of managing, and to provide resources to the things. If that was to happen, I'm excited because it would essentially mean that I wouldn't be able to get hired permanently, which would be great. But additionally, there is a lot of talk about an infrastructure fund for supporting, providing municipalities with funding to build the necessary infrastructure to support housing. And I've seen that again in multiple things. So I'm hoping that that passes. If anyone has any questions, I gotta hop into a 3:30, but as always, I commend this group for the work that you're all doing. Megan, Eliza will be in touch to square away the scope, and I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day in your meeting. It's always a pleasure to be part of this.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you, Ben, and thank you, Sam, for your additions to that conversation.
I just want to add one other observation that I think in talking to legislators, that they get focused on the numbers for the housing, and I think there's a real good chance that they may be misunderstanding the work that's being done in the fair share housing. It's when numbers are discussed, it is really they came out with a preliminary number, and this was brought up by the Open Communities Alliance of like 130,000 households or housing units. Well, it's really households. It's you have struggling households in Connecticut, and there are a variety of interventions you can do to address their housing needs. And by and large, most of these households are housed. About 3,000 are not. So I think if you have any discussions with legislators, I think the bigger issue is how do we address housing need, and affordability of housing, of people paying too much of their income, and there also is a need to build housing, but really there should be a toolkit of interventions. So.
All right, we do not have a quorum, so we're not going to be able to act on the minutes for this month, but we'll add it.
Raise his hand.
Yeah, hey everybody, Phil
Yeah, Pat
Shattuck.
Phillip had his hand up. Yep.
I'm just going to be really quick. I just wanted to piggyback on Sam's call to talk to legislators. So the next round of like public information on the fair share study should be coming out later this week, early next week, which is the municipal numbers. The reason that I say reach out to your legislators is because the fair share housing study is not an official policy. It's essentially a research project for the CGA that OPM was directed to do, and it will have 3 different sets of numbers for municipalities because as the study was set out to do, looks at 3, among many others, but it will really explore 3 different approaches to estimating need. And it's really on the legislature, if they do anything to implement a policy or anything like that. And so especially if you have thoughts on those numbers when they come out, OPM is just a caretaker in the study. Talk to your legislator with your thoughts on how that might impact your town or to influence their discussions on a policy in the future. Towns Take the Lead would be an implementation bill, and so that's a particular avenue to pursue with your conversations with them. But yeah, be on the lookout. This is just the numbers at this point. The final report coming out probably early mid-May will have a discussion about implementation factors, like kind of hypothetical stuff. Like if you do this, these are things to consider. And I know that you guys at RiverCog have had a lot of conversations around these kinds of things. But again, OPM is not pursuing a policy. We're just recommending things to the legislature for their consideration.
Thank you. That's good to know. You said the numbers should be out this week?
Yes, we're aiming by the end of the week.
And when that comes out, Pat, we will do the same as we did for the last the last release where we'll summarize and send things out too, and be prepared to talk about it at the next meeting.
And I put the link to the Fair Share Housing Study webpage. So I assume, Philip, when things become public, they'll be posted there.
Yeah, thanks for doing that, Sam. It'll be posted to that website.
Right.
All right, anything else on the bills tracker discussion?
I can't actually add to that. The work live ride did get passed through committee, so it is heading for floor consideration. Eliza, the other bill that you had at the end, I don't remember which one it was off the top of my head, but the housing committee is done considering bills, and it doesn't look like they took any action on that, so that can be considered not moved for committee action, but as Sam said, like the concept could always show up anywhere down the line.
Okay, thank you.
Is there an avenue for public comment on the numbers when they come out, or do you have to go through the legislature and not to OPM?
Yeah, talk to the legislator.
Yeah, the Public Act didn't provide for public involvement as part of the process. So really it's the hearings where this is discussed, where the public will be able to either attend or participate. And unfortunately, I don't think there's going to be a presentation by the consultants to the Housing and Planning and Development committees jointly on the final report. So if that changes, Philip, please share that information. But that would be it. If there was such a hearing, that would be an opportunity to attend, to at least watch.
We can ask our legislature for one.
Okay. All right, brings us to the end of our meeting. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
We don't have quorum.
No.
We just adjourned.
We just adjourned.
Adjourned.
Thank you, everyone.
Adjourned.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Good discussion.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks all.
Yeah,
Bye-bye as well.
Bye, Lola.
Your cat? Your cat named Lola?
No, Liza's cat was it was cute.
Yeah, did you see her?
I saw her.
I was hoping Lola would notice.
She noticed the mailman outside. She doesn't see screens. She just sees, like, she's 12 and she's starting to go, like, her vision's starting to not as good, but she still sees things from very far away. It's just amazing. I know she's growing right now. A runner just went by. Yep. That's what she does.
We'll get him, Lola.
Yeah.
All right. I'm hitting end.
All right. Bye, everybody. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.